That's not to everybody's taste. I mean, some people like having that separation, but if it were me, I would probably do what I could to try to like put a cathedral ceiling in and take down some walls and just sort of brighten it up. But that's just me.
This is his first house. Like, come on.
I know.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a regular discussion about building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Deputy Editor Matt Milham.
How's it going?
Digital Brand Manager Rob Wadsack.
Hey, everybody.
And producer Jeff Rose.
Hello.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and you can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it's a pleasure to see you guys this morning. How are you guys doing?
Good. It's Friday.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Missed you guys. I haven't seen you in a while. Nobody's been inviting me to these things.
Don't take it personal, Rob.
No, actually, I was a little relieved because I've just had a lot of stuff going on, so that's okay.
So the last time I saw your home project, you were putting like a second layer of drywall, I think, around your kitchen window. What the heck is going on there? What are you putting a second layer of drywall on?
You can never have enough drywall. Yeah. No. So my kitchen was built in the late 70s, early 80s, and the backsplash was Formica glued to the wall. And so when I ripped that stuff off, it came off very easily. The adhesive was pretty crumbly. And so I figured my only other option was to scrape that stuff off the wall because I didn't trust going over it with any tile adhesive. So I just figured the easiest thing was a couple of tubes of construction adhesive and some 1/4-inch drywall and some screws. And I got a nice clean surface to start with.
That seems smart. Did it screw up any of your trim or cabinet details?
No, because, I'm kind of starting everything from scratch. The cabinets, the countertop's plenty deep, so adding a 1/4 inch isn't going to hurt anything. I did have to pack out the trim around the door. Instead of using 3/4, I went with 5/4 trim around the back door because the tile will butt that, and it would have been it would have been flush instead of set back from the door trim. Mm. So, but that's the only thing I had to really deal with. Luckily, my kitchen's kind of chopped up, so a lot of the decisions I make don't affect other surfaces as much as they might in a more linear, situation.
What else have you been doing besides the kitchen, or has that been your focus of attention?
Well, I know we talked about the kitchen, and then I dove into that wall project last year and basically completely ignored the kitchen. I'm finally full steam ahead back in the kitchen, and the 3 things I was working on this week were I installed that new full glass back door that I bought 12 years ago that's been sitting in my attic. It's like a nice fir double pane, full height, simple glass door, a little more modern look than the cruddy old door that was there. And
so you fit this to the existing jamb, is that correct?
Yeah, because I had already, I guess when I was doing the siding, I could have torn out the jamb and put a new one in, but I already had everything. I planned on doing this years ago before I wanted to get into a bit. Well, probably because I was cheap, because buying a slab door was a little cheaper than buying a pre-hung. But so I basically, cut the bottom off the door with a circular saw and planed both of the sides because I needed it like a 1/4 inch narrower and like a 1/2 inch shorter to fit into the opening.
Did you actually scribe the door to the jambs? Because that's the method we've always advocated that Gary Katz seemed to make famous, where you actually put the door slab in the opening and hold it there with an elastic bungee, and then you actually scribe the jamb onto the door so it fits without any fixing.
I considered doing something like that, but what I did is I measured the old door, and it was cut completely square. They never did any weird bevels or anything on it, and I just did a really good job checking all the measurements on the air, and I just matched hinge locations, doorknob locations, everything. Actually, I compensated for some sag in the door by raising the deadbolt and the door handle like a 1/8 of an inch, but everything else was just spot on. Measure the original door, transfer all my measurements to the new door, and cut it.
And it fit the first time.
Yeah, fit right in there, no problem.
I mean,
every single hinge lined up. I couldn't believe it. I was sure that I was sure that I was going to have to chisel one of the hinge recesses. But the coolest part about it, though, is I don't know if you saw in the new issue that just came out last week, but we featured this new smart lock from this company called Level.
Yeah.
And I had Jen Morris write it up, and I was like, this thing looks really cool, because I think I've been thinking smart locks are pretty cool for a long time, but most of them have these giant boxes that stick off the back of your door. And this new Level lock, all of the working components are inside the deadbolt itself.
So they're in the bore of the door, and there's nothing like sidecar-ish on the back of it.
Yeah, no. In fact, you can buy just the guts for like $300, and no, that's
Sorry.
no. But the thing is, you can even do that with your existing door hardware. So like if you have an existing, deadbolt and lock system, you just replace the inner workings of your deadbolt. But I got the next model up, which is called the Touch, which comes with the actual keyed part and the knob on the inside. And I just bought a doorknob to match it, and they even sell doorknobs to match. But the cool thing is it's like touch sensitive. I can use my phone with an app. I actually have it set right now where when I arrive home and I'm approaching the door, it just unlocks. So when I get there, the door is already unlocked. So
I'm going to wait for the movie. And you have to promise to tell us that when this thing locks you out of your house and you can't get in, you will tell us.
Well, it still works with a key. And I have a key on my keychain, so that's
what's the point of it if you have to carry a key anyway?
Well, I mean, how heavy
Most
is
of the
that
time
key?
You don't need it.
Yeah, no. So you hide a key under a rock in your garden.
I don't know. Like we had one of these on the Project House garage, service door, right? And it lasted for 2 weeks before it quit working, and I'm just very skeptical of all this stuff.
That was years ago when these things were new. I mean, this thing, I'll tell you, it's beautifully machined. Like it's a work of art the way they put this thing together. It's really nice.
You said in our correspondence about this wacky thing that you couldn't have any drag on the bolt. And I've never lived in a place where you didn't have to push on the door or lift up on it at some times of the year to make the bolt engage. Do you really think this is going to work year round?
Well, you were also surprised that I was able to take some measurements and get my door to fit on the first try, too. So, Patrick, maybe it's an operator issue.
Matt, what have you been doing?
Just outside stuff, I let's see, rotated my compost last weekend. Cool. That took about 2 hours. That stuff is really heavy. Yeah, the temperature had dropped. Like it had made it through February, still over 100 degrees, and then all of a sudden the temperature dropped, and it was like down to 40 some. So needed to be
once
rotated.
You stop that biological action, I'm sure it would, it'd be hard to get it going again, right?
Yeah, well, it's already gone back. When I checked it yesterday, it was back up to 64 again. So
I love that you're so nerdy that you keep constant track of this. That's fantastic.
I just want to make sure that it's working right.
Did you get Ben Bogey to come over and put some sensors in the middle of it?
No. I have a probe thermometer that's made for it. So it even has a little temperature ranges on it that show you when you're in the good zone.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Otherwise, not a whole heck of a lot.
How about you, Jeff? What have you been doing?
Nothing really on the house. So.
Well, my big news is that I was on the phone this morning trying to get an appointment to get my COVID vaccination, and I just today turned into the age group that Connecticut decided was worthy of vaccination. So I'm not going to share that with you.
Well, happy birthday.
So I started dialing this morning at 8:00 when they opened up the phone line, and it felt very much like getting U2 tickets when 1989 for the Joshua Tree tour.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like that's the first time I've gotten a busy signal in years.
and just like back then, I was just hitting the redial button, and eventually got through. And the upshot of that is they give you. They take your information and then they call you back within 24 hours to make an appointment. So I have an appointment to make an appointment, which is pretty darn exciting. So those of you who are out there listening, hopefully when we're able to travel again for Fine Homebuilding, I want to come see you. I'm getting a little stir crazy here in Newtown.
Yeah.
This first feedback comes from Chris in Chicago. Greetings, FHB podcast peoples from the Windy City. As I mentioned in a previous email, I was tasked with trying to get an entry door into a 72-inch tall opening on a 100-year-old Chicago bungalow. Well, the cold and near-record snowy February retreated back north, and more pleasant weather arrived, giving me an opportunity to install my project door. I ordered a 76-inch pre-hung steel skin entry door from Big Orange. 76 inches being the smallest you can get. I proceeded to ever so gently remove the door bottom and disassemble the jamb, head, and threshold. I cut a further 2 inches off the top and bottom of the door to give somewhat of a normal look to the hinge spacing. I then cut another 4 inches off the top of each side jamb and reassembled. Installation went relatively smooth for a house of this vintage with its Frankenstein construction and the probably scores of people who have worked on it with varying levels of skill. Lessons learned. Make doubly sure your measurements and cuts are correct so as not to have to scrap anything and buy another door. Bidding something like this can be problematic because of all the hours spent pre-installation making the door size you need. Best approach is as a T&M job. Thanks for the great podcast and advice, Chris in Chicago. Do you guys think something happened to Chris's first door slab?
I was wondering. He needed Rob over there making his cuts.
So we have some photos of Chris's door install in the podcast page, and he did a nice job. And I think it's the best solution for folks of normal means when it comes to replacing an odd height door. What do you guys think? How do you do?
Yeah, it looks good. I was curious about the siding. Did you see how that was sort of butting into? I can't tell if it's the jamb or what it is there.
It looked it was unremarkable. So I thought it was just trim around the door.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was just curious the way the siding butts in there. It looked like it was some kind of metal siding. And I'm just wondering, like, what's the proper way to kind of finish that or capture that?
Well, yeah.
Let me have a look-see here.
I mean, you're saying is it kind of looks like the door jamb is thicker than the wall, and it's uncased, and they just sort of use the edge of the door jamb as the finished edge.
That is kind of what it looked like, but I was mostly wondering because the siding looks like it was probably originally caulked to whatever that is, but it's metal siding, and I don't know if they normally use a J channel or, if you could case it with something with like a rabbit behind it to sort of clean that up a little bit.
I don't know. You're picking on his work here.
I'm not really. I'm mostly just curious because I've never installed metal siding, and I don't know what the standard is there.
Well, so my mom's house still has the aluminum siding that was probably put on in the 60s on it. And they, like modern siding installations, aluminum siding, when I say modern aluminum siding installations, we're talking about from the 80s, right? They have J channel, but like my mom's house has preformed corners on the outside corners and inside corners. And it was just butted up to the trim for doors and windows and then caulked. And as you might imagine, that's held up fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, in my neighborhood, because there's lots of these old late 19th, early 20th century houses, and unfortunately, a lot of them have had aluminum or vinyl siding put over the old clapboards for one reason or another. And sometimes they'll go completely over everything. They'll tear off all the old trim, and then they completely remove all the character of the house. But one thing I see that's pretty common is they leave all the corner boards and window casings, and they put the J channels right up against them. So you've got these fields of vinyl siding, and at least they retain some of the character of the original house. But from a water management standpoint, I'm not sure if that's the best solution for sure.
Well, at least vinyl siding can dry. It's a rain screen in itself. But yeah, I see what you mean, especially around windows and doors at the top is notorious for rot when people put those replacement siding on there.
Yeah.
This comes from Rich from Ford. We've heard from Rich before.
Is he actually working at Ford?
Yes, he's an engineer at Ford.
Cool.
He's very cagey about what he does there. I don't know. He's like on some secret team.
We should ask him if he knows my brother Roger.
I was scared to actually put this feedback on the podcast with you on here, Rob, because I figured you'd go off on some wacky Ford tangent. Hello, podcast. Just got through episode 334. One of the topics was backup power for your home. Batteries and generators were discussed. I want to offer up another option, a backup generator you drive. Hybrid F-150s can provide power for your essentials in a pinch. It doesn't solve the running out of gas problem. It gives you a lot more time for the grid to come back up without a loud motor annoying your neighbors. The F-150 battery electric vehicle will be available next year. Thanks to you and your team for the education and entertainment. What do you guys think about this? Completely electric F-150.
Well, so it's the truck is still has the one of the EcoBoost V6s in it, but it's a hybrid system. So it's like a lot of the Toyota hybrids where they've got an electric motor that kind of boosts and helps boost MPGs in city driving. And but the thing is, they're like, hey, we got this huge battery pack in here. Why not give people another way to use it? So there's this like power block inside the back of the truck, just like this panel on the side of a generator. And I saw that in the article, there were 3 different models up to like 7.2 kilowatt hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
And can you run the truck to charge the battery?
Oh yeah, I mean that's what it's part of the hybrid system of the truck. So you're basically borrowing the battery that runs the hybrid drive system in the truck to use for a power source.
Sweet.
Yeah, they said in Texas they were in one of those articles you pointed to. They had like 500 of them available in Texas, and Ford was letting people use them as emergency power sources.
Well, that'd be kind of cool if you didn't have any juice. Have someone drive up with a truck and let you plug in. That'd be sweet.
Yep.
You getting one of these, Rob, when your lease is up?
My lease is up in like a year and a half, and we'll see, because I absolutely love my truck. It's a 1-year-old F-150 STX, which is kind of like the sporty black simple base model, and it's just done everything I needed to do. And I'm like, you know what? I've got so little miles on this thing now because I don't go anywhere anymore. And that I'm like, why? I should probably just buy the thing instead of leasing another one.
Well, yeah, you know who's owned it, and it's going to be low miles, which I don't know if you guys have tried to price or look at a used truck, but the prices and mileage are insane.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of replacing the one in my fleet, but used truck prices are at an all-time high from what I understand. Hey, if any of you out there listening want to sell a truck to me, send fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Hi, Kylie. Listened to the podcast this morning, and I'm sending you these pics of my daughter helping us rebuild our deck last spring. The transit she is using was her grandfather's. Her brother is holding the stick. She's in an architecture program, listens to the podcast, and has an interest in green and sustainable building. Regards, Doug. Well, I didn't want to wait for Kyla to be on the show. I wanted to send this, but this was in response to the program that Kylie hosted with Emily and Deja for Women in Construction Week, and they did a great job, so I wanted everyone to hear about. Doug liked it, and Doug's daughter is going to be an amazing builder, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Looks like they're building a freestanding deck, which I like.
No ledger?
No ledger, yeah.
Yeah.
You like digging extra holes, Matt? That sounds like you.
I don't necessarily love extra holes, but I don't like attaching decks to houses.
Because of flashing details?
Flashing details, if it fails, you can damage the house. There's a bunch of reasons not to want to attach a deck to a house, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, a lot of people love to do it, but I don't.
Did you see? Did you see Andy Engel was doing some porch recently with those helical posts, and he's like, I don't know if I'll ever dig another hole in my life. And
boy, once you try those, I bet it's hard to go back.
Yeah.
And you actually know the bearing capacity, unlike a poured pier, right? Well, you're kind of taking a guess.
I think that's one of the things that I think gets overlooked as a benefit on those things. I mean, the biggest benefits to me are that they're quick, ready to build on right away, and that they don't disturb the site like digging a 2 foot wide hole does. But also, I mean, they basically have like a pressure gauge, and they can measure how much pressure it takes to push that thing into the ground. When they hit a certain level, that's when you got your bearing capacity, right? Is that right?
And you can get bigger helixes for soils with lower bearing capacity, or smaller ones for denser soils that are harder to get the thing into. It's pretty cool technology.
Yeah.
Our first question comes from Campbell. He says, I live in an old house, 1902, with the original floors. They're 2.5-inch wide softwood strip flooring attached directly to the joist. There's Doug fir on the first floor, southern pine on the second. The upstairs flooring has seen better days. It's been hacked up and reattached during a bathroom remodel 30 years ago. Refinished a few times, it squeaks dramatically. To fix the noise is way beyond the scope of a few screws here and there. My thought is to pull it all up, expose the joists, sister them as needed to get them level, and even as I can, lay 3/4 inch subfloor down and install new southern pine strip flooring. I understand I'll have to cut doors, move moldings, etc., but my biggest question is how to deal with how the stairs will meet the new higher floor. The stairs are currently code compliant with the correct rise and minimal variation between the rise of each tread. If I don't adjust them after reflooring, the top landing will be too high above the stair tread, and to make it all correct would require spreading the new 3/4 inch difference out between each tread. They are housed stringer stairs, so I can't just pop the treads off and bump each one up a little, spread out the 3/4 inch difference. Is there an easier solution I'm overlooking? Installing the subfloor, the wrong tack, and just complicating the whole thing? Plowing ahead and ignoring the height difference seems like an unacceptable solution. Well, so the reality is I corresponded with Campbell, and he doesn't have housed stringers. He has stringers and risers that are attached to notched stringers, so they can be pried off. He says, here are some pics I took last night. I realized after I'd gotten home that these stairs are actually notched stringers, not housed. I guess in one way that simplifies the process to get the height of each step correct, but it is annoying since I did a bunch of work last year to de-squeak them and would have to undo it to move the treads. Regardless, the need to redo these floors and get the stairs right remains, and any best practice you and the gang can share about the refloor process would be welcome. Campbell, what do you guys think?
So
Yikes.
I think he has to do one thing that I end up doing a lot lately is I have a conversation with my wife about some elaborate plan that I have, and she says, "Do you really want to do that?" And I'm like, "Well, now that I think about it, no." But basically, I don't know. I mean,
Hey, Matt has a question. What's your question, Matt?
I mean, maybe this is kind of obvious, but if there's no subfloor, all of those partition walls are sitting on that finished floor. So how are you going to cut that?
He's going to have to cut that all away.
Right. Any walls that are running parallel to those joists, like you got to make sure that they're sitting on a beam, or that, you might not be able to cut the flooring all the way back to those walls.
Well, it's not easy at a minimum, right?
Right. Yeah. You're going to have to do it in little tiny pieces and block, and, it's going to be much more complicated than I think he's making it sound. But I don't know. That's my first concern, is that you can't really, it essentially is the subfloor and the flooring all in one. So there's huge structural issues beyond the stairs.
Well, so what are the structural issues? If he left the strip flooring under the walls, using a multi-tool or a flush cut saw to cut it away,
that would be fine.
There aren't structural problems there, right?
No, that any wall that's running perpendicular, I would think is not going to be problematic, and it's going to help keep those joists from rolling or whatever while you're doing all this work. But you got to make sure that those walls are actually sitting on something, sitting on 3/4 inch, flooring. I assume that there's probably one joist very close, maybe right underneath the wall. I see
what you're saying. So if it's in the middle of a joist cavity, it's going to be stressed.
It's kind of like when you do advanced framing, you got to make sure you stack all your framing members. Where if you've got a slightly offset joist for an interior wall over flooring with no subfloor, you might have a situation where it's not
going to
really
deflect. Yeah,
not really fully supported in the center.
What were you going to say earlier, Rob?
I was just going to say, I mean, I've dealt with this to an extent. I mean, I added thin flooring to the top of my existing flooring at a staircase, and I kind of fudged it and just put a little thin strip of wood on top of the top stair tread, just to sort of make it so that it wasn't a tripping hazard. Obviously, it wasn't making it so that the rises were all exactly the same. I don't know. I mean, it's like, if you don't like the flooring because it's a mess, I might just remove the flooring in places where you really don't like it. Maybe remove a whole room if you can, and get some milled up to that same size, and put some new flooring in the way it was. Because I mean, the thing is, they built houses like that for years and years. My house is 1871, and most of it is exactly the same kind of flooring with no subfloor. And yeah, maybe it's a little creaky in spots, but I don't know. I don't know if I would do all of that framing changing and adding a subfloor and changing the staircase. It's like I might find a compromise somewhere in the middle.
Well, I mean, if he wanted to avoid having to touch a staircase at all, I mean, this is kind of a possibly a very dumb idea, but when
hear it.
When you take all that flooring out and you sister those joists, sister on both sides and set them down 3/4 of an inch, and then just cut strips of subfloor and basically just press it in.
I was thinking the same thing, but also like thinking, well, is that a little sketchy? But I mean, a lot of old bathrooms were done that way for the tile base.
Yeah, and are still done that way when you're trying to retrofit.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think that's a bad idea. I would be really tempted to put down new strip flooring over top of this, and then you don't have to cut the old stuff away. And if it's all squeaky and stuff, just make sure you put down a really good layer of construction adhesive as you're putting down your new layer of flooring. And then to deal with the staircase, the code lets you have up to 3/8 of an inch difference between your riser heights, which I think most people would think is kind of a lot. But 3/4 of an inch spread over, I counted, he has 9 treads, right? It's 5/64 of an inch. And
yes, you rip a bunch of
nothing.
shims.
Yeah.
You basically pop them off, rip a bunch of shims.
And each one gets progressively 5/64 inch taller as you work your way up your steps. And by the time you get to the top, it's going to flush out with your new 3/4 inch tall flooring. And my system eliminates all the cutting and getting rid of the old subfloor. And then how the heck are you going to work when there's nothing there and you're going to be fitting these little pieces of plywood in hallways and stuff? It's going to be a complete hassle.
Yeah, it just seems like I don't even know how you move around up there while you're doing that work. But I mean, it's the kind of thing that I would love to get into.
Yeah, this sounds like just like your kind of project, Matt.
I see. I would have done that when I bought my house when I was like 30 years old. I would have taken on a project like that. Now, after 20 years of working on my house, I'm kind of like, well, can I find a very nice compromise? So sort of like, look at all your options, from just buying some new milled strip flooring or some new flooring and going over it, like you were saying, Patrick. That's, I think, the least invasive if you really, truly want the flooring. But of course, you have to find some way to deal with the squeaks. But then, I don't know. There's sort of a spectrum of options here, from everywhere from just going over the flooring to
doing nothing and leaving it alone.
Well, that's nice.
Enjoying
too.
it.
Personally, I like the character of a beat up old floor in a house.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, this floor, I mean, the pictures of it doesn't look nearly as beat up as I thought it would, because soft pine, walking on that for 100 years, I mean, I would have thought that would be dented to all heck. But
yeah, but it's southern pine, right? Yeah. So that's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Campbell asked, the best practices about the refloor process would be welcome. Campbell, leave it alone. This comes from Adam. Hello, all. My current electric hot water heater is showing its age, 8 years, and I'd like to get something new and more efficient. I know you've discussed in the past podcast, but the technology is changing so quickly, I figured I'd ping you on your thoughts anyway. I have 3.5 bathrooms, with one of them being a large master bath. There are 4 people in the house, and it's all electric. I started looking at heat pump style water heaters, but have a concern. I already have a whole house dehumidifier installed on my air handler. I also 100% air sealed my basement with rigid foam along the foundation and cut and cobbled along the rim joist. Adam, you're my kind of guy, buddy. I also put high-quality caulk along the sill plate. I followed that up with stone wool insulation. The basement is super comfy. Anyway, would a heat pump water heater dry the basement too much? Are electric on-demand systems any good yet? Appreciate your help. Adam from Fredericksburg, Virginia.
I mean, assuming the dehumidifier is on a humidistat, I mean, I would think that it's not going to dry it more than the dehumidifier is on its own. But I mean, if he really is concerned about that, he could go with a split hot water, a split system, with like a stand-in with the with the compressor outside, and so that won't affect the humidity inside at all. And those things are extremely efficient. As far as
they also cost like $4,000.
They cost a ton of money. Yeah. So I mean, if you're willing to pay just because you're worried about humidity, then there you go. But as far as the resistance water heaters, I mean, you're never going to get performance more than 100%. Like 100% of the energy that you put in is the max that you can possibly get out of those. Where with the heat pump water heaters, you can get much more energy out than you put in, because you're not using the energy that you put in to make the hot water. You're using it to run a refrigeration cycle that strips the heat out of the air. So whether that's inside air or outside air, is really the big, I guess, difference. And so, I mean, if you had people who have like high performance houses, if they have like a condensing dryer, a lot of times they'll put their heat pump water heater in the same room with this condensing dryer, and then just plan their laundry times around like when they need hot water. So, run a load of laundry at night, first thing when you get up in the morning, throw it in the dryer, take a shower, and then you're getting basically this waste heat that's coming out of this other appliance and using it to heat water to take a shower or, do dishes at night or whatever.
That's an interesting thought, because in the early days of like energy efficient homes, a lot of the passive solar people and all the other sort of early adopters would have to basically come up with behaviors that actually affect how their house runs, not just equipment. And so that's kind of a neat idea, putting the dryer at the same as the water heater. And to his point about his question about will it over dehumidify? I mean, really, it depends. It depends. It's not going to do that. But also,
it's just because the dehumidifier just won't run as much. It doesn't have as much load because this water heater is doing some of that work. And if it's like Matt said, if it's on a humidistat, it's just going to maintain that humidity.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing about heat pump water heaters, if you do an inside model, is that you are using basically the heat in your house to heat your water, because it's taking that heat from the air, unless you use a stand-in, like Matt was saying, which takes it from the outside air. If you're in a room where you're actually using that space, I don't know. I haven't experienced one firsthand, so I don't really know if it's going to affect how much it affects the temperature in the room or the amount of heat load in the room. But it sounds like this basement's nice and cozy, and there's probably plenty of heat for it to steal from that space without being too much of a burden.
Adam, if the heat pump water heater scares you, and you're going to want the very biggest one because of your 4 bathroom or 3.5 baths, right? And you're talking about a water heater that I believe is like 120 gallons. If that's, too much, I would really recommend a Marathon, which is a resistance heater with a plastic interior and a lot more insulation, and they have fewer standby losses, and they last a really long time. I've heard nothing but good things about them. And if you're interested in seeing what's inside of one, you're going to want to go to Matt Reisinger's YouTube channel and check it out, because he cuts one open and you can actually see why it's better than a normal steel-lined electric resistance water tank. You guys ever seen one of these things?
I think I did catch a little bit of that video that he did. Yeah, it's
years old, right? Like probably 3 years old or something.
Yeah,
I remember watching it. Yeah.
Jeff, what do you think about this? Would it worry you to have a dehumidifier and a heat pump water heater in your basement?
No, I don't think it would. I mean, because all you're doing is just changing the conditions in the conditioned space a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. The dehumidifier doesn't care that you're running a heat pump water heater, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Our next question comes from Stuttgart, Germany. Did I say that right, Matt?
Yeah, Stuttgart.
Stuttgart?
Stuttgart.
You spent some time there, right?
I've been through it. We had the paper I worked at, we had a bureau there, so I never really had to go there. But I drove through it on my way farther south plenty of times.
Big industrial city, right? Like lots of industry there.
Yeah, it's like the headquarters for Mercedes-Benz and a bunch of other stuff.
Well, so we heard from Benjamin. I'm a long-term listener from Stuttgart, Germany. For years now, your podcast has been the perfect edutainment on my daily commute. Since I've never set foot in a wood construction in my life, brick builds are almost the standard around here. I cannot deny I find the way of building in the United States fascinating with all of its advantages and drawbacks to what we do here. Although I don't work in the construction business, I get the feeling that your building industry is doing a much better job educating and promoting progress in the field to builders. Are we?
Are we? Well, I don't know what
I
they're
think we're
doing in
giving
Germany.
a false
So,
impression.
yeah. I mean,
He says, I always smile each time you mention a Schluter certified installer or similar. I guess one trunk lid is not enough for the installation certificate stickers that one can earn in this flood of products. Being an engineer, I enjoy it especially when you take a deep dive into a very specific problem. But sometimes I'm lacking a base level of understanding of problems which may be common when building with wood for years. The articles on your website where gems like GBA help a lot, but it is quite time consuming to collect the various pieces to reach a verdict. I'm sure a lot of your listeners feel the same way, especially at their first contact with modern high quality and performance building. Can you recommend one or two books which convey most topics to consider from the foundation to wall design, from air sealing to insulation when trying to build an energy efficient home? I don't mind it being explained on an advanced level. Getting an experienced builder up to speed on the bottom fig wall does not have to start with framing basics either. I don't care about roof venting since there is 2 years worth of podcast dedicated to it. I'm going to read his PS and then we'll go back to his original question. He says, PS, with Patrick's irregular appearances as the tool expert in the shows years ago, I am under the impression that you stopped covering equipment, although he is part of the core now. Please reconsider keeping us updated on what toys to get. Keep up the good work and happy building. Regards, Benjamin. Well, that was a great letter. So as far as tool coverage, we always like covering tools. Maybe we don't do it enough. Love to hear from you folks what the rest of you think.
We have plans to ramp that up a bit this year too. We've just been kind of busy and distracted the past year or so, and I think you and I are both going to be probably involved in that quite a bit.
That sounds scary. So, what books? That's a freaking good question. I have no idea what to tell Benjamin.
I went, Martin Holliday routinely reviews books, and he can be pretty tough on a lot of the books in this area. In fact, it's almost amusing. It's almost good to read his reviews just for his amusing comments about some of the ones he doesn't like quite as much. But he did like this one called Essential Building Science, and it was by this guy Jacob Racusin, a Vermont builder who what is he? He's with
New Frameworks.
Yeah.
He works with Ace McCarlton.
So basically, I'll read a little quote here. He says, the book is an important introduction to topics that residential builders need to understand. If every builder in North America followed the principles outlined in Racusin's book, the quality of newly built homes would increase dramatically. So I think that's a good one to start with.
There you go.
Jacob is super smart. So I would definitely go with that.
I was thinking back to my early education, and I know, Matt, you have experience with modern carpentry, which is a textbook. I don't know if it's up to date, but like if you're just learning how to build houses without the emphasis of high performance, you just want to learn how they go together, like that's fantastic. I presume they're still publishing that, right?
Yeah, I have multiple editions of it. I don't know.
What do you think? Am I right on that? Do you...
Yeah, I mean, they cover everything from basically laying out foundations, to like constructing foundations, floor systems, walls. But I mean, they don't really get into high performance building. They're basically teaching you how to build to the International Residential Code, which is, as we all know, the worst house you can legally build. So, I mean, they cover the basics and stuff, but
it's kind of textbook format too, isn't it? Or
it is a textbook.
Yeah. It's very much a textbook. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, they're great books. I mean, I have, beyond those, I mean, the ones that I used for school and the ones that they used after I was through, I have a copy of that too. One from Pearson, that's also pretty good. But I mean, they're really just getting you the basics, and then from there, probably something like Jacob's book, and then or even a book like Green from the Ground Up, which is kind of like a really basic sort of survey of like all these different higher performance, building systems. And then if you see something in there that you really like, then, you can dig deeper into one of those wall systems or whatever it is that you want.
I remember the books written by Joe Steebrook for cold and mixed climates, which, when I got them, they were spiral bound and being published by Taunton. And then I believe the Building America program picked them up. But they're just a bunch of assemblies meant to improve construction. And they show you where the caulk goes. They show you where the rigid foam goes and all these things. And probably they're dated now too. But I remember those being supremely helpful. And but I don't know if there's like, they're meant to show you how to build stuff on the job site. You flip to the page, you can show someone an assembly that you want done. I don't know if they would be good background information, but if you really just want to understand how things go together, that's another good resource.
You mentioned the Building America program, and that's been going on for decades now. And it's basically, there's a bunch of teams of building scientists, engineering firms around the country who do regular research on construction details and construction methods. And each of those teams has including Building Science Corporation, which Joe Steebrook works with, has like a huge library of great research articles on stuff like this. So, I mean, go to the Building America program or go to buildingscience.com and you'll find they're not full books necessarily, but some really great guides on every topic you can think of.
And subscribe to Fine Homebuilding, Benjamin. We ship to Germany. Jeff, you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, most of my stuff is more basic.
Like what?
Building Illustrated, I think it was called. I can't.
The construction details. What is that book? Is it the Thalon book or something like that?
We've talked about it before, but I don't remember. I didn't think to dig it out.
Charlie Wing's book that's been in several iterations now, the Illustrated Guide to Building. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah. But that's more basic, I think, than what he's looking for. But of course, my copy is 40 years old. So
I got to ask, and maybe Benjamin will write, like, if Benjamin can't build light wood frame construction in Germany, I'm kind of curious about his interests. Are there any wood frame buildings, Matt, to your knowledge, going up in Germany?
I can't remember seeing any new ones. No, it's all like block construction and then sort of like an EIFS type, insulation, exterior insulation systems. But I mean, that said, there are a lot of old half timber houses and, that are sort of like filled with wattle and daub and they maintain those. And I mean, they're beautiful. I mean, there's, plenty of little cities and towns that are, mostly that. So.
But also Benjamin's an engineer, which means he's a curious guy, which he's probably just looking for more context so he can appreciate everything that we talk about. Oh, so I said Thalon. I meant Rob Thalon, who's done a bunch of construction books, and there's one called Fundamentals of Residential Construction. I don't know it that well. There's also a graphic guide to frame construction, I think, that's his too. Yeah. But if you look up Rob Thalon, there's a bunch of, he's got a lot of basic construction books that might be good.
Yeah.
So our next question comes from Adam. And Adam is in the world of construction seeking the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And
if he can find it, he's going to be a billionaire.
Hi, podcast team. My wife and I are looking to buy a new home and have noticed a lot of split level homes on the market. I have to say I'm not a fan as they have a pretty low curb appeal in my opinion. Do any of you have suggestions on how to spruce up these types of homes? This will be our first home and I'd like to do as much of the work myself as possible. I'm thinking minor cosmetic things I could do pretty simple and easily. Large structural changes like revising, adding a roof floor is likely too far out of my experience and wouldn't be able to complete it in any reasonable amount of time by myself. So that would be something I'd look to a contractor for help. I appreciate any insight or buyer beware. I enjoy listening to the podcast, especially the building science topics. Thanks again, Adam.
So the key phrase in one of his sentences there was, in my opinion. I mean, the curb appeal thing, and everybody's got their own taste, right? I mean, Patrick and I were having a talk the other day about how when we were in high school, all those late 70s, early 80s, boxy cars were just like so uncool because they were old, but now we have sort of a nostalgia about them. And I think I'm kind of feeling the same way about the
I think you have more than I do. Like
I'm kind of feeling the same way seeing the two photos of the split level houses that he sent pictures of. But in all seriousness, the split level ranches or ranches in general started in the 1920s and 30s out west, and really embraced some of the first houses in our country to embrace modern design aesthetics. So if you really want to make one of these houses look good, or the best it can at least, I would say lean towards like a mid-century modern design aesthetic, because that's really what matches them. The ones he showed pictures of, one has a brick wall, one has clapboards. Like I might go with like natural wood clapboards instead of painted clapboards. Some rich colors. I actually jumped on house.com and found this article that was like mid-century modern split level exterior home ideas. And there's just like, if you just basically look for stuff from that era, you can kind of find some of the details that maybe even existed on some of these houses 50, 60 years ago that have been stripped away by newer owners, that might have made them look a little bit more appealing than some of these like 70s, 80s, and 90s quote upgrades had done to the houses. So that's my advice.
Matt, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I've only been in a few of these in my lifetime, I think. And my experience in them, like, even though they seem to have, pretty big windows in the front, not all of these necessarily do that he sent, but they were still kind of dark inside. And I don't know why that is exactly, but I think, maybe if
because like half the living space is the basement. I think that's why.
Well, definitely the downstairs portions are very dark.
It's also the old shag carpeting, the dark wood paneling that probably made him feel that way.
All of that stuff just kind of makes it a little bit unappealing. And it's a little hard with because almost everyone, I don't know that I've ever seen one with a roof slope above like a 412.
Yeah, they're pretty shallow.
So I don't know. I mean, I think you could make the space feel a bit more open and inviting if you can maybe take down some interior partition walls in the main area. Usually the kitchen is sort of like, pushed off somewhere and kind of walled in. Not always, I don't know. And that's not to everybody's taste. I mean, some people like having that separation, but if it were me, I would probably do what I could to try to like put a cathedral ceiling in and take down some walls and just sort of brighten it up. But that's just
this
just
is his
me.
first house. Like, come on.
I know. But I mean, if you can take out, a non-bearing wall, that's not a huge pain in the butt. You have to scab in some flooring
until you find that it's full of ductwork and pipes and wires and
Yeah.
I mean, if we're looking for the less invasive details here, I mean, I think a lot of people don't appreciate that or don't really look at something and see the potential in that. A lot of times it's just about colors and scale and details. Like, you don't have to change a house a ton to sort of change some surfaces to make them pop a little bit more, or to clean them up or brighten things up. Put some simpler trim on the doors, because I mean again, they're modern, so they probably have pretty straight, simple square stock trim would be appropriate, as opposed to the clamshell casings you might see in one of those old houses. Sometimes
go really wild.
What's that?
Go really wild. Go with like Victorian trim and like paint everything like super bright colors.
I think that's the exact opposite what I would tell them. I was like, just keep it what it is. Embrace it, And how much curb appeal does it matter when you're living in the house?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like I'm more concerned about what it's like living inside of it. Like, you're not looking at the outside of it most of the time.
Right.
So
personally, I love the fact that the front of my house is like kind of this beat up old vinyl siding, because then it kind of hides all the nice stuff that I've got inside.
Yeah, once you get to your backyard, it's like heaven back there.
Jeff, you go first. What do you think about this?
I kind of like Rob's idea of, embracing the mid-century modern aspects of the raised ranch or the split level. I mean,
look at some old Sunset magazines, like old magazines from that era for ideas,
Yeah, because they had a lot of glass. And
yeah, you're also going to have to get that wardrobe from that era to really feel at home in it.
So,
Yep.
this, like I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, this is the holy grail of design. And I've seen people try and take this on. And one of the more interesting things that I see in a house in Newtown is someone tried to put like 2-story tall double doors on the front of this. So it kind of was meant to like, improve the massing of the central element. But that looks worse because it looks like someone who's 15 feet tall lives in this house, right? So like when thinking about this through the decades, that was one of the solutions I thought would maybe help this problem, but it doesn't. And the other thing I've seen people try and do is put a deck or a porch on the overhanging second floor, right? Or upper level. And I think that works better. But then to Matt's point, it makes the basement even darker, right? Because then you have this deck that's shielding any sunlight. And, that would maybe work if it was completely walkout, but I don't know.
Yeah, just tell them to email me and I'll talk it over with them because I love trying to figure this kind of stuff out. So
okay, so all podcast listeners, Rob is now offering free design advice and consultations on your home remodeling projects.
Yeah.
Do you want to give me your cell number, Rob?
I've got it right here. No.
Have you guys seen people attempt to, improve the curb appeal of these homes? What do you think? What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, like especially with like the Garrison overhangs, there's so many. Not all of those houses have them, but the ones that do, that it just seems like everything that people try to do just ends up not looking right. Like I've seen where they've tried to bring that front wall, basically, bring it down to the ground, and it just makes that front facade look so tall and so weird with that low sloped roof. It's just like the wall, like where the windows are located and everything, it just looks wrong. So I don't know that there's a good way. That's why I say anybody who can figure this out is going to be a billionaire, because everybody's going to be coming to you.
Well, because there are a ton of these homes, right? They're everywhere, all over the country.
I mean, around me, like there's actually one, like, I don't know, if the trees weren't there, I could see it. And it's been on the market since probably May or June last year. And I don't know if they've had anybody look at it. At the same time, almost every other like old house built in the 1800s that's like nearly falling down around me has sold for, $500,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but to your point, Matt, it's like scale and proportion, I think, are so much more important than specific details, because it's so easy to say, oh, well, a colonial house has this kind of bracket and this kind of window trim, but really it's like you can put the right details on a house according to the style and they'll look wrong if you don't get the proportions right. So I think really that's like, look for examples of ones that you like, whether it be in an old magazine or on Pinterest or House. There's going to be a house out there that looks like, and there's so, we have the ability to see stuff that we couldn't see, a decade ago with all these social platforms for design. So it's like, just keep looking until you find something you like that's similar and try to emulate it.
Gives me an idea for another podcast. Fix the split level podcast. Adam, I'd say, embrace the architectural style. And it certainly makes sense if it's your first home, because they have a lot of square footage and they're often less expensive than other architectural styles, as Matt just pointed out. And use that to your advantage. And if you don't really get into it, use it as a launching point for your next house that you like the curb appeal better. That's what I would say. So, like everybody who's in the business, we've been talking a lot about the astronomical material price increases that's been going on as a result of COVID-19. And so Kylie asked for our help on this subject. She says, hey, Patrick, in response to a question on the GBA Q&A forum, I want to develop an article on buying basic materials, building materials in 2021. The skyrocketing pandemic-related costs of some builders thinking in terms of alternative materials and methods. And we heard from Ian Schwantz, some of his changes he's made to the house he's building because of the material cost increase. I put a call out for people to weigh in on GBA and have gotten some response, but I wonder if it's something you could bring up on the podcast. I'm going to write the article and would love to have lots of different voices weighing in with how they're responding to the unavailability of normally accessibly priced products. The more regionally diverse input, the better. So, folks, how are you dealing with the material cost increase? Are you changing what you're speccing? Are you putting different things in? Are you holding off building? Are you making things smaller? Are you doing more of the work yourself because you can't afford to pay contractors because of the increased percentage of material costs? Let us know what you're doing, or let Kylie know. You can send your responses to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and I'll forward those on to her. Or you can call Rob directly and give him your ideas. Have you guys bought anything recently?
Yeah, I bought some Advantech the other day, and it was like $67 a sheet.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
Wow.
But,
I was in one of the home centers last weekend, and it was almost $36 for a sheet of 1/2-inch OSB.
Oh, I think that's gone up since today. Somebody on my Facebook feed, I think, said they saw 50 in upstate New York for 7/16 OSB, which blows my mind.
I think I was paying $8 or something a sheet for it the last time that I actually needed it for something. Yeah.
So one question you didn't ask, Patrick, too, is I'm curious, is like how many projects have been, in the works that are being put off because from the contractor's perspective, like a client's like, no,
was
I can't.
He on the same show with us, Matt? Didn't I just say you're holding off on construction, but until did I forget to say that?
I think so. I don't know. I mean, I definitely am. I was planning on expanding my garage, but I'm not spending that much money for
me too.
Plywood.
We wanted to put a carport on, the other side of the barn opposite my shop lean-to, right? But I'm not paying $50 a sheet for 1/2-inch plywood. No way.
Yeah.
I actually
buy a new car.
I actually ran out and filled up my truck with all the materials that I was planning on doing for my basement floor. Like now I was going to buy a little bit at a time, but I was like, no, if there's any chance the prices are still going to go up, or even availability issues, as the spring building season starts really picking up, I was like stocking up. So I'm driving around with a bed full of subflooring in my pickup right now. So
man,
it's because I need somebody to come over and help me move it into the basement.
Yeah, I'll stop by. I don't know, Jeff. You try not to buy any new building material, in my observations anyway. You try and salvage as much as you possibly can. Have you had to buy anything?
Not lately. I mean, not since, the beginning of the lockdown period.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually, my wife just came home with a bunch of OSB, like 4x3-foot sheets that were parts of a pallet. But they were.
That's why you two were so compatible. She brings you plywood.
Well, that's why two of us live in a 4-bedroom house.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Kylie, I think it's a great concept, and we welcome your input, everybody. And those pieces, those kind of feature articles get better with more input, right? Because not everyone has a single solution, but crowdsourced, you get a pretty good thing. I had to buy shingles last weekend. I made a firewood rack, and just for my own vanity, I decided I wanted to put shingles on it because it's so close to the barn, and I paid $40 per bundle, which seemed normal to me. But I've also been hearing of roof shingles in very short supply, and I've also heard that the home centers are allocated stuff automatically by the companies that sell to them, that like they get dibs on stuff that your local lumber yard may not. And I'd be curious to hear from somebody who knows more about that than I do, which is everybody, I'm sure. But Do home centers and big retailers, are they guaranteed material when other suppliers are not? So if anyone can answer that, that's something else I'd love to know.
Have you seen other materials, like, just because I've bought a lot of small things lately, like light switches and other electrical components and door hardware, and I didn't notice any higher prices in any of that stuff. I mean, I don't really have anything to compare it to because it's been a while since I've done a project like that. But it seems like wood is certainly the primary one that's the issue.
Yeah, and I heard kitchen cabinets, and I've heard asphalt shingles, like I said. Drywall is supposed to be in short supply again.
Well, and I brought this up on the last time I was on, but the cabinet plywood was essentially the same exact price it was last year. And I had bought a ton of it like before lockdown because I was like, I need some projects. No idea how long this is going to go on. And I still have some left, but I was surprised when I went there last weekend to the home center, and it was pretty much the same exact price I paid a year ago. And it's cheaper now than half-inch, CDX.
Maybe I'll like build my carport out of, veneer plywood, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, folks. If you got any ideas, let us know, please. You guys have anything to add before we part company?
Nope.
Well, have a good weekend, y'all. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Matt, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks very much for listening. Keep craft alive. Happy building.